Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. About 10 years ago, I was at a classic car auction and there was a beautiful 1956 Chrysler for sale there. I wanted that car. A matter of fact, that car is this very car right here. This is the car that I wanted to buy about 10 years ago at this auction. Well, I started bidding on this car and I realized I was bidding against somebody. When I turned to see who that was, it was Harold LeMay, owner of the world's largest collection of automobiles. At that point, I dropped out of the auction because I knew if he wanted it, he was going to get it. I did get a chance to meet him afterwards. He was a gracious, warm, wonderful man. Well, we are here at the Harold LeMay Museum in Spanaway, Washington. It is incredible here. It's just wonderful. And as a matter of fact, in the 10 or 12 years that the Vintage Vehicle Show has been on the air, this is the most requested show we've ever had. Well, finally, we're here at the LeMay Museum through the gracious invitation of David Madera. David, how are you?
Lance, good to be here. Thank you for coming.
You bet. David is the CEO here at the LeMay Museum. How did that come about? How did you get that position?
I've been a consultant to not-for-profits for a long time, and I was flying out of Boston one day. I picked up a Wall Street Journal article, the story of Harold LeMay, who, as you said, collected the largest collection of autos in the world, and he had died. And the story went on to say that the people in Tacoma and the family wanted to save this collection and not let it go the route of Harris. And they needed somebody who knew how to raise money. And I went home, I said to my wife, hey, this would be fun. Cars, Pacific Northwest, let's go do it. So I called, and they were looking for someone, and I got the job.
Great job. I don't know if this is correct, but I really feel kind of down deep inside that Harold would have wanted me to have this car given the circumstances that he picked it up, and I didn't. And
you're good, Lance.
Not good enough?
Ask Nancy.
Okay, I'll ask Nancy. So tell us a little bit about the collection here.
Well, the LeMay collection is really known, the way I think of it is as the Smithsonian of the automobile, because it spans 100 years of American automobiles, some foreign, but broadly American. There were over 3,300 at its peak, and roughly 600 or 700 were General Motors, about 300 Fords, a couple of hundred Chryslers, and on and on. And then, of course, the old classics. And our earliest is a 1903. I believe that's a Cadillac. And they come almost to the present day because Doug LeMay is still buying.
And Harold LeMay was able to amass this collection based on, he was a garbage collector.
He was a garbage collector. He started with one garbage truck, and he built a business that today operates in I don't know how many counties. It's a big deal. Trash, recycling, landfills, etc. And it gave him a good living. And he also began to travel and just find cars.
Did he, when he was on his garbage route, did he, oh gee, there's something pretty cool in the backyard?
Oh, sure. And as he made his routes, people began to know him and began to say, hey, Harold, there's a car you ought to look at.
Get that out of our yard.
And his drivers. I mean, the legend is that he was paying his drivers, if they found cars for him, you know, they'd get a little tip, a little bonus.
So they worked hard.
So he had a lot of scouts out there, a couple of hundred of them.
I've heard that all the cars he's bought his whole life, he only sold, what, 3 of the cars that and he tried to get those back eventually?
It's about right. The stories all vary, but I heard 5 cars, and he bought 3 of them back after he had sold them because he didn't like to sell anything.
You know, he's married to a good woman, wasn't he?
He is. Yeah. She's a great woman, actually.
That's great. Well, can we take a look at some of the cars?
Absolutely. Let's walk around.
All right. David, I think this is the first 1940 Cadillac I've ever sat in. This is as good as it gets.
You look good in it, too.
Thank you. I understand Harold had a real love for Cadillacs.
He did. It's probably the strongest point of the collection. He had over 150 of these, Lance. I love this one. It's, you know, look at this tan and black. It's just a classic beauty, and it's a V16. People today hear about Cadillac wanting to produce a V16. Well, we have a couple from the 1930s that are V16s, and they are gorgeous. I think this epitomizes why Harold loved Cadillacs. Big, beautiful.
Well, the motor that's in this is about the size of a current Cadillac, I think. So you have to do a little remodeling.
It does have a big presence, that's for sure.
A car like this, no doubt, gets used. I mean, the LeMay Museum. Do you take this out and display this at various functions?
This kind of car
promoting?
This kind of car would go out to various events. We do a lot for charities, other charities in town, and help them have their galas with a bunch of cars out. And we go to classic car shows in the region with these, and parades. So a car like this that can seat a number of people, put the top down, is a good parade car. People love this kind of thing.
David, I've noticed here that you have a lot of cars that are in original condition, but you also do your own restoration here. You have your own staff, and this is an example of just exquisite work that you guys do.
Thank you. It's a beauty. It's a 1950 Mercury coupe, and as you and I were talking, they made a lot of them, and they became popular as hot rods.
So this is going to have a small block Chev in it and drop down 4 inches, or?
A small block Mercury, yeah. 255 cubic inches, yeah. But as you're pointing out, these were so basically plain that they got left by the wayside. And so kids from our generation came and picked these up for no money at all and turned them into the classic hot rods.
A car that what you mentioned earlier, $1,800 to $2,100 when it was new, and we were buying these for $50 to $100 and putting another $200 in it, and we were set.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Throughout the building, I've seen Pacers in here, I've seen Pierce Arrows in here. What a wide variety of cars that Harold enjoyed. Pretty eclectic. How did that happen?
Because as you used the word enjoyment. I just think he enjoyed cars, and that's why I call this America's Car Museum, and that's really what we put out there in people's minds, because it's everybody's car. That's what's special about this, from the Pacer to your grandmother's car to the hot rod to the classics, they're all here.
Yeah, they're gorgeous cars. We have some pretty high-end cars here, some very expensive ones. Can we take a look at those?
You bet.
All right. I suspect this is a high-end car here, a couple of bucks here.
This is a good car. This is a 1917 Pierce Arrow, belonged to Rudyard Kipling, so it is rare. And it was shown last year at Pebble Beach.
And how did it do at Pebble Beach?
It did great. I mean, we don't ever enter for prizes as a museum, we just go to show. And it drew great crowds, and it did the 50-mile tour over the mountains and along the drive real well.
Sitting here, I've sat in 1917 Fords, and you feel like you're sitting in a 1917 car. This one is a little bit spiffier, a little bit upscale.
It's a limousine. I mean, look at the beautiful lanterns, and it's got jump seats, and it's a limousine.
How do you think I'd be as a limousine chauffeur?
I think we ought to give it a whirl.
Let's give it a try.
Let's see how you do.
It says here a 1929 white Prince of Windsor Roadster. I've never heard of it. It's a one of four. Don't know anything about these. And that's one of the incredible things, wandering around the facility here, all the different buildings you have. There's just surprises everywhere. How many buildings are involved in this display?
A surprise is a good word. And at one time there were over 50 buildings. I think it's down to maybe 30 now, because we've sold off about 1,000 vehicles. Mostly parts cars.
I was told by one of your staff earlier that you actually just located a bunch of cars in a building in Olympia that sort of got lost in the shuffle. They didn't know that this was part of the collection, and suddenly you have even more cars?
That's news. I know. I hadn't even known that, but it's no surprise. We pulled a number of cars a few years ago out of a barn in Kansas where he had bought some cars at an auction, had no way to transport them, bought the barn. And I still think that we'll get a phone call someday, from Iowa or something.
Get your cars out of here. The building we're in, this has a pretty interesting history.
Harold ran out of room at his house. Nancy says she's got the only house in America, 5-bedroom house with a 350-car garage. That's how they started collecting. He ran out of space, so he bought this Marymount Academy, which was a military academy and was also a convent at one time. And so we're in the main hall of the Academy. It's called LeMay Hall now, and he's stuffed it with cars.
So there used to be either a lot of guys marching around here in uniforms or nuns, or?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, there's a beautiful old chapel in the facilities, and it's still used by church groups from time to time.
At another end of the building, I noticed you have a whole bunch of cars. Can we go look at those?
You bet.
All right. We're in another part of the museum here, and here is a very flashy 1939 Buick. Gorgeous car.
Straight 8, Buick Century, as you said, 1939, beautiful. It's a 2-seat Roadster. Put the top down and take a nice Sunday drive in it. It's really a fun car.
I wonder, with the red color like this, if back in 1939, would this be owned by kind of the executive on the rise, or the executive that's just got there but still has some sporting blood? You know, he wants something that's flashy but a little bit conservative at the same time.
Remember, the 30s were a flashy era. I mean, we have a 1930 Duesenberg, same color scheme, just dropped dead. They really, coming out of the Depression, they wanted to
Let's
show
party.
their stuff.
Yeah, we've suffered long enough.
Right.
I have received a letter in the past where somebody complained, your show is called the Vintage Vehicle Show, but you don't have enough real vintage cars. Well, this is for you. This is truly a vintage car, a 1906 Ford. David, this is pristine. Looks like it's new.
It is new to the collection. Doug LeMay bought it just about a year ago. It runs like a top. It's just a beautiful car. One of the earliest in the collection. We have a 1903, as I said, but this is a 1906. Model N, so it's a predecessor to the T.
It almost feels like a sports car, just with the fenders and the way you're sitting here and
it is
open to the elements.
Yeah, a little 2-seater. It scoots. It's got real great torque. Not a lot of top end though.
A car that looked like this, it's just a Ford, but this is obviously a pretty fancy Ford. So back in 1906, do you think this was seen as, well, anything was probably pretty exciting to have in 1906 because cars had just been around for a few years.
Right.
But this, do you think the 1906 Fords were still considered, they were on their way to being the everyman car, but they still were something pretty upscale, I would imagine.
I think this was, more than the everyman car, with all this brass and the flashy color, and that it's a runabout. You know, I think it's a lot of fun.
When the general public comes through here, which they can do, how many days a week?
5 days a week, Tuesdays through Saturdays. This is open.
Have you noticed anything in particular? Is everybody looking for a 57 Chev in here? Is everybody looking for a Model T? Or is there anything that the general public really wants to see, is seeking out?
Well, the 50s cars are hot, and the muscle cars are hot, as you know. But the car they really seek here is the Tucker.
Is that a Tucker over there?
That's a Tucker over there.
Follow me. A 1948 Tucker. You must be very proud of this.
I love this car. The story of it is that it was the one car Harold always wanted to have that he never got. And so Nancy and I went down to LA, and she bought it at auction. She burst into tears when she got it. And it's a beauty.
Well, it's wonderful that she got it. 48 Tuckers, they had so many safety features, design features. They were way beyond their time. Most of it was good technology, some of it was a little unusual. But the styling on them, they're just a gorgeous car for 1948.
Absolutely. As you can see, I mean, it's the Tucker Torpedo, very much influenced by the war and by missiles being started and jets and all of that. So suicide doors. Cutaway, as you try to get in it, I mean the cutaway roof line so you don't bump your head. And you can get in real easy. I mean, look at that.
Yep.
And then as you know, in case of impending crash, the safety zone.
See now, this area right here, Tucker actually was serious about this and he built it this way. You're about to get in a wreck. So the poor person driving, they're on their own. The passenger, yeah, they're gone. But the passenger, this is true. This is what you're supposed to do. You see the oncoming tree or semi or whatever, you jump down into this area that's been made large enough for you to do this and hope for the best. say goodbye to your driver, and hopefully when they unmangle this, you're not too mangled within it. But you know, he was thinking, he was trying.
Well, he did. He had the padded dash, as you can see, and pop-out windows.
That's right.
And those were also his nods to safety.
Another safety item, also a design item that was neat on these things, was the Cyclops system in front. Tell us about that.
You're right. The instead of the conventional 2 headlights, he's got 3. And all 3 of them move as you turn the wheel so that the direction of the lights goes with the direction of the turn. And of course, today they're bringing that back to something
That's something new. And there it was in 1948. Something else on this that you pointed out to me earlier that I never knew about these was where the gas filler is. This is pretty neat.
Yeah, he wanted to do it in a stylish way, so he just put it into the little wingspan back here, and there it is. Not quite easy to get at, I don't think, but looks good.
Yeah, it's neat. And probably the most unique thing about these was they had hoped to acquire. Were they going to get the motors from General Motors, or they're going to design them themselves?
I think they were going to design them themselves.
But they just were running out of time, and the government was on their heels.
Right.
So they went out and bought a bunch of helicopter motors.
Franklin helicopter engines made by Howard Hughes. And, you know, some people think that the story is that the big 3 were really afraid of Howard Hughes being behind this, and that's why they helped crush him.
Not that it was the right thing to do, but I can understand their fear.
Sure.
Air-cooled. Good idea?
Bad idea. By your question, you know it. Tough to keep cool in the back of a car. So this car does overheat. It'll do 120 miles an hour. It's got plenty of room.
Yeah, before it locks up. Yeah. Beautiful car, fantastic. What a treat to have this in your collection. This must be towards the top of the pecking order.
It really is. It draws big crowds, and it's in the beautiful, it's number 7 restored as an original, which is very rare today. And the color evening gown blue for his wife's evening gown.
And there were 50 of these built?
About 51.
51.
Roughly half left, maybe half of those drive, and maybe half of those original, as opposed to replacing engines and suspensions.
Okay, David, what is it?
This is a 1929 General Motors GMC van, shipping van, and it was owned by the Emerald Shipping Company out of New York and Chicago to ship walnuts.
Ah, California's finest out of New York.
Yeah, diamond walnuts.
And this is substantial. This is like the side of a building.
This is one of my favorite vehicles, Lance. Obviously, it's not pristine. And Harold who knows where he yanked this out of. But I think this is one we should never try to restore.
And that's something that a lot of people over-restore cars or take cars where it's just fun to look at them the way they are rather than making them look like they weren't when they were new, making them better than they were new.
Right.
So this is neat, leaving it like this. The future of this, it's just going to sit here and be enjoyed by everyone? Or?
Well, we will bring this to the new museum when it's built, and we'll probably take some steps to make sure it doesn't deteriorate, just fall apart. But I think it ought to be left with all its wornness and patina and the great way the wood is gone, and let people see what it looked like when it was out on the road.
Right. You mentioned the new museum. The LeMay Museum is going to be the West Coast museum. Tell us a little bit about the plans for that.
It will be the world's best car museum. I call it a gathering place to celebrate our love with the automobile. And it will have this spiraling tower with 100 automobiles up through it. We call it Tower of Horsepower, spilling into 10 galleries. And then around that we'll have areas on speed, design and technology, and culture and history. And there'll be exhibit areas, but there'll also be fun areas. Like we're going to have a full-size drag strip in there. Well, not full-size, a 400-foot drag strip where you can actually get in a dragster and race against me with a Corvette engine behind you.
Wow.
We're going to have fun stuff. A show field for concours and swaps and rallies, retail, dining, entertainment. It'll be just killer.
Destination spot. That's going to be right by the Tacoma Dome, correct?
Yep, right by the Dome on I-5.
On Tacoma, Washington.
We think we'll draw 1 million people a year.
I bet you will.
And draw them from all over the world.
If somebody wants to be part of that, if they want to contribute in any way they can, what should they do?
Thanks for asking. They can look us up online at LeMayMuseum.org and find out all about us and how to get involved. And find our phone number and call in, and we'll be glad to have them participate.
Well, that's great. Well, David, we'd like to thank you for being on the show today and having us as your guest. It is an incredible collection here, and there's some information on the screen that lets you know just what David just said about how you can be of help here, be a visitor, volunteer, whatever. So thanks again, David.
Thanks for coming, and come back.
All right.